Hi folks, welcome back. My name's George. Okay, this is my new lathe. I've had it for about a week. Had a lot of fun, put oil everywhere, turned a lot of steel into scrap. Had a lot of fun with it. But one thing I've learned pretty quickly is that this tool post that comes with it is a pest, particularly for beginners. I think if you could just get your tools in there once, shim them up, and maybe if you had more of them so you could take them out and replace them, then that might be a reasonable solution. But for me, I've had a terrible time with it. I've broken a few pieces of high-speed steel every time I regrind it and put it back in. I have to get it back on level with the lathe, and that means shimming again, and it's just a real pain. Do that 10 times and I'm sick of it. So I know now that I want a quick change tool post. Fortunately, I bought one, but now I need to make it fit. There's a bit involved with that, and like a lot of these things, you end up going down a rabbit hole in order to achieve what you need to do. So let's have a look what the problem is. Okay, so I took the compound off, and here it is, complete with the dovetail underneath, as we can see. Now the tool post that it comes with obviously registers on this piece here, this cylindrical piece, and the post through the middle is 10 millimeters in diameter, and it's necked down to a smaller thread. Under the bottom here, it's been recessed. That's a 19 millimeter diameter recess. It goes in 4 millimeters, and that's obviously coming into the base of this. That's taking some of the strength out of it. Now, the tool post that I've bought is the AXA. This is the correct one for the size of the lathe that I have. Now this comes with this piece that you're supposed to turn into a T-nut for a compound slide that has the ability to slide the T-nut in. This is obviously too small and it doesn't come in that setup. So that there for me isn't required. I've undone this a little bit so it's not complete, but we can see that the main post down through the middle that the tool post is both clamped down with and registers with is considerably thicker, and in actual fact that's 9/16. So this, even though it's a Chinese copy, is a copy of an Aloris tool post, which is an American company, so therefore this is imperial measures or American measures. The thread is a 9/16 18 thread. So there's a few things that come with this. With the bottom here where it screws in, hopefully you can see that, this threads all the way to the bottom and it holds this spiral piece in that the sliding dovetails work against. So the center piece has to screw into the bottom. So I can't take away that in order to make room for that, so it won't sit on it. So this, as it stands, sits proud. This is 22 millimeters, I think, and that's not. I can't remember the size of it, but you get the point. So I can't take this away, so this has to come off. Now, this obviously is what it would register on as it stands. It's not great, there's a little bit of play there, but it's fine. I don't know if it's really an issue anyway. I don't know if it really needs to register on it, but I figure that if I can make it that it does, then why not? So that's my standard thinking at the moment. I'm going to make a bigger hole for this, make a new pin. So the hole will be bigger for that to fit through. And then because that's 19 mil and this is 9/16, which is close to 14 millimeters, there wouldn't really be enough. This roll pin here is designed to stop that rotating, obviously. So what I really need to do is make this recess here bigger, and I'm going with about 24 millimeters. It'll just give me enough room. There's about 35 in between the bottom of the dovetails. So I'm going with about 24 millimeters, and I'll show you why in a minute. And a new pin that will go through, and everything else will be the same. The only other difference I'm going to make is I want this to be 9/16 because it needs to fit inside here and register on it or thereabouts. But the rest of my lathe is metric. living where I do, everything's metric. Everything else on the lathe's metric. I want to just neck it down very slightly and put a 14mm fine thread on it. Now what I haven't shown is I've jumped ahead and started making the pin. I haven't threaded it yet. This started out as an old bolt. This bolt, just for interest's sake, used to hold the wing of an aeroplane on. And when they took the wings off and pulled this pin out, the person who did it used a screwdriver or some form of lever to lever the pin out. And before it's inserted back into an aeroplane, it needs to have a magnetic particle inspection to make sure that it's still suitable. This one failed. And I've got sort of 5 or 6 of these, and they'd all failed. So I thought, well, that's a great bit of material that I can use for something else. And just as it turns out, it worked out quite well for this pin. So that's where my 24mm comes from. When I round that off, just take the corners off, it leaves me with about 24mm. And that now is 9/16 to go through the middle of here for this to sit on. It sits quite nicely with very little slop. In fact, it's slightly better than the pin that it came with. I'm just waiting for a new nut to turn up. I don't have any thread wires at the moment either. This is the problem with starting with these things, is you don't have a lot of stuff. So I'm just going to cut it and make sure the nut fits. And even though that's probably not what you're supposed to do, that's all I'm going to do on that. So the problem now is, how am I going to do this? So obviously, if I take this out and mount this onto the faceplate in my lathe, then I don't have a tool post, so I can't do anything apart from drill a hole. So of course I could take it to somebody to do it for me, but where's the fun in that, right? So I've seen a few people on the internet who have done away with the compound slide in an effort to increase rigidity. That made me think that it would be an ideal thing to make first, because I can make that relatively easily, and then I'll have somewhere to mount my tool post, that then I'll be able to work on the compound slide on my faceplate, machine this down myself, machine the recess myself, and make it all fit together. It was all getting a little bit too complicated for my head, so I decided that I'll put it onto CAD on the computer so I can have a decent look at how all this is going on, and then I can formulate a plan to move ahead. So let's go to the computer and we'll see what I've come up with. Okay, so here we can see the compound slide as I've drawn it up. The pin's now removed, and we can see how I'm going to shorten the registration post, if you want to call it, down to about 2.5mm. Okay, now this is what it's going to look like completed, and the cross slide's in there for comparison. Now, obviously with the compound slide removed, I'm going to need some form of tool post. So let's remove some of the components and we'll see what I've got planned to build a replacement for the compound slide. So here it is again with the compound slide removed. Looking from the side, we can see the cross slide and the quick change tool post, and we've got about 50mm. In fact, it's just a fraction more than that in between. So my plan is to split that up and make 2 pieces. So here we have a bottom piece with the holes for attachment, and that'll be joined with another piece above it. So we've got 4 corners that have attachment pins going through, and they're basically just bolts that are adjusted to fit as T-nuts. Well, that was the plan until I realised that I couldn't get any 25mm steel very easily. So I'm just going to redesign that slightly, but for now I've just made this temporary tool post holder, I guess you'd call it, and I've just used 5mm angle and welded it together. So a few learning aspects there. One of them, my welder's not the gruntiest, so I had to pause quite a bit on the welding, and I'm not a welder by any stretch. You can see that I didn't quite get the penetration that I would have liked in here. In that corner there's down to about half, which wasn't that great. Most of it's actually not bad, but that was down a bit, and I also ran out a little bit of argon just towards the end, so got a little bit of spotting there. Weld a couple of plates in here just so when I tap, I would drill and tap that for that. It's got something to bite into rather than trying to sit half in and half out. So that should be okay, I think. How rigid this is going to be, I don't know. My intent, after I've drilled the holes for it to mount on, is to also weld in a piece kind of like that. It'll be further in. I think I'll probably have to angle that and just put that in there and weld it in, just to give it a little bit of rigidity, sort of in that plane, whatever plane that might be. I tried putting it in the lathe and indicating on the 4-jaw chuck to get this face even, but I realised the welding had hardened the edges, so every time I got out to the end points, it'd smash the tips off the high-speed steel. And I've also been told that it's not a good idea to do it with carbide because carbide's brittle anyhow. So that didn't work. Anyhow, I got it a little bit truer there, and I really need to cut about 5mm off this end here and reshape it. So I'll just have to do that with the angle grinder. Like I say, it's only temporary anyway. I'll tidy it up a little bit as time goes on, but for now, that'll just have to do. Okay, so this is a little bit further down the line. I've welded this up. I've got this piece in the back welded in. I just sprayed some black on there because I've just been away for a few weeks and I just didn't want it to corrode. So I put this in the lathe and the 4-jaw chuck just to level that up and true it up a bit. Had a little bit of trouble with these corners because they were quite hard. So I just left a few small marks on there, but generally the finish isn't too bad for what it is. Bottom I haven't done yet. Not quite sure how I'm going to attack that, but what I am going to do in here is tap that for a 10mm M10 bolt and just cut it off, so I've got a small pin because that'll fit into a recess in the cross slide. In the top here, of course, I need to tap this now for a 9/16 18 so I can put the Toolpost centre pin in, and I think that will be reasonably rigid. I'm not quite sure. In the front here it's still a bit hollow. It's fairly solid and heavy, but it may lose a little bit of rigidity with that. Be a little bit difficult to do much with it just because the holes that mount it onto the cross slide will be in the way with the nuts, so I can't really do a lot with it. I could perhaps put a small piece in there that might improve it, but again, this is really only a temporary solution, so we'll see how it works out. It should give me enough of rigidity to get the job done just to fix the compound, and so I can put the Toolpost on there, but we'll see how that works out. In the meantime, I'll get on with tapping that and continuing on. It looks like that'll work. Okay, so here we are now, and I've mounted the compound to my faceplate and made a couple of little pieces of fixturing equipment there. So I've got this strap here to hold it in place. I've got it approximately in the middle at the moment. I'll dial that in when it's sitting on the lathe. And I've just made this little piece of strap here with a cutout just to stop this from flopping around. Now, of course, the load of this, when it's spinning around, this is going to want to try and pull itself out. So I'm going to have to run it fairly slowly. I can't really come up with a simple method of holding this in without adding even more weight on this side. So I'm just going to see how I go. I'll just run it slowly and just make sure it doesn't jump itself out. If it looks like it's going to move, then I'm going to have to change the system. But this is the start. Now, of course, I have to balance it. So I've just come up with this old-fashioned spreadsheet. And so I've measured the weight of the cross slide and put that up there, 1.08 kilograms or 1,080 grams. I've measured it and got an approximate position. Now, of course, this side of the center and the same out here is balanced. So I'm really only interested in the weight from about here out to the end of the unbalancing weight, if you like, along with this strap. And this strap here, of course, is helping things because it's on the other side of the center. So this sheet here is pretty simple. It's just got the mass down here of each of the components and the arm from the center of where the center of gravity is approximately, and I just figure out the moment so we can either add or subtract depending on which side of the center of gravity it's on. Come out with the total moment, and then I'll be putting something out here, and that's about 90 from the center roughly. And so I need about 398 grams out there, which is just dividing the moment by the distance. I end up with 398 grams. Now the bolts and the nuts are going to be around about 96. So about 300. I'm not trying to send a rocket to the moon here, so it doesn't really matter. It's about accuracy. I just want it approximately balanced so it doesn't try and shake the lathe off the bench. So I've got a piece of material. I'm just cutting that at the moment. That should give me around about the weight I need, and I can bolt that out there, and then we'll move on to the lathe and get it all dialed in. Right, here's my temporary tool post in position, and I have the center pin in here, which you can't see obviously, but it's holding that in place. I've got that squared up and I've mounted the tool post on it. I've also just put in a tool here and measured the height. I put the center in the spindle here and just got the height off that for now, so that'll do. This is only temporarily in place anyway. I don't actually need this tool at the moment. The next tool I'll be using will be the boring bar to get the center of the compound slide machined out. So here it is at the moment anyway. It seems to work. I like it so far, and there's just enough room at the bottom there, about 3 millimeters or so. I've got a 10 millimeter tool in here, and I want to use 12 millimeter tools. So hopefully that'll work out, and I'll be able to use my 12 millimeter tools in here, give it a little bit more rigidity. So we'll see how that goes, but so far so good. Now here's the setup. I've got it pretty much dialed in, the best I could find. The pin that I had, which is this one here, this outside piece, I was trying to indicate off that, but turns out that's not concentric with the base of the pin, which was a bit of a nuisance. So I had to move things slightly. The other thing that makes it a little bit awkward is that this pin is slightly stepped. You can just see it there. The top piece is a very slightly smaller diameter than the bottom. So with all of this carry-on sitting in here, then if I wanted to have it sitting out a reasonable amount, there was a bit of movement with it. So I had to have it in quite close. It was quite difficult to actually get the gauge in there with all of this mounting bracket and everything. But anyhow, I think I've got it. I certainly hope I have. And I've just touched off in there and brought it back out just to see, to double check that nothing was moving. It certainly looks okay so far. I'm running it quite slow, so I'll see if I can find somewhere to mount the camera and give you a quick look. I'm taking very small cuts and doing it very slowly, so this is going to take a while. So I'll come back when I've done a bit more. That is really nice. I'm happy with that. So now I probably just need to take the burr off the edge here. And next thing, we'll drill the hole. Or at least I'll probably end up boring the hole actually, but not with that boring bit because it's not going to fit. Right, so here we've got the boring bar in there now and bringing out the centre to the correct diameter for the new pin. Slow process again. I'm also running it way slower than it should be for the carbide tip, but again I just don't want any of the stuff to move, so I'm just taking it really gently. Very small cuts, very little pressure on anything. Right, let's have a quick measure of this. Yeah, we've still got a ways to go, around about 0.8 of a millimetre. Alright, well here it is. I've got to say it came out worse than I wanted. I just slightly overcooked it. It's not much, but there's just a tiny bit of play in there which I don't really like. But anyway, I've got that now. If I'm not happy with it, I can always make another pin with a slightly larger base just right in the bottom. But anyway, for now, I'm going to cut most of that off with a hacksaw and then I mounted it back in and just trim that off so it's level. And then we'll see how that goes. But we're getting there anyway. So here's the setup here. I'm actually, because I couldn't get the throw on the cross slide, I'm actually having to use the boring bar. It's not quite how I wanted to do it, but this will just have to do for now. We'll just cut the top off with the hacksaw, and now just the very last bit. Okay, here it is so far, just a test fit. So generally pretty happy with it. Could have been a little bit better in a couple of spots, but I think that'll be quite functional. So I've got to put the roll pin in. I won't bore you with that piece, I'll just do that in the drill press. And I'll come back to you when I've finished it. So that's my take on putting the quick change tool post onto my Chinese lathe that had the boss. I've removed it. Seems to be quite sturdy at this point and reasonably rigid. One thing that surprised me was this temporary solid tool post. It's actually been remarkably good. It was only designed to be temporary, but I think I'll probably end up using it more often. One thing that with it, I just made it just fractionally taller. It's probably about a millimetre too high, so I need to come up with some method of flattening this base plate and getting it down to the same height, so these can be quick change without having to change the height on them when I change from a compound slide to this monstrosity. However, I've learned quite a bit. It's been a lot of fun. It's come out pretty good. A couple of little minor mistakes here and there, but generally pretty happy with the result. Thanks for watching.